everyone, this is Gail. Welcome tonight to Overcoming the Obstacles. It's good to see you all. We're doing a study tonight on Delilah in the Bible. And I'm going to be talking just a little bit about Samson too, because you can't really understand the full impact of what was going on without also looking at Samson. And I do have it posted over in our Facebook group. I did just get that posted. Sorry about the late notice on those, you all. I've been totally messing up for like the first time in ever. I'm working on scheduling some of these things over in Facebook. But for last night's live stream on the other channel and tonight's live stream, right about the time the stream was supposed to start, I go in, I double check, nothing's happening, and it's like, boom, guess what I did wrong? I put down the wrong date, so I clicked the wrong thing. So that is now fixed. And so here we are, we're ready to go. Now, I see over here in the chat, we have Lori Jean Fanilia here. She is also Women's Station channel, so go check out both of her channels. And we also have Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man the Hero, who was recommending something that I could do for the other channel, and that is a jump starter. And I absolutely love mine, so that is a really good point to make. And they're small, the small little jump starters. But anyway, I actually have a review on one and a demo of actually using it, and both of those videos are up on my other channel, and that's the Asperex charger, jump starter, however you want to call it. So those really are great things to have. So I appreciate you all coming in here tonight. Now, I don't know if you have Bibles, don't have Bibles. I do have down in the description box, I've got a couple of links that'll take you to some scriptures that we're going to be looking at tonight. It's the story of Samson and Delilah starts over in Judges at chapter 16, which is down there. But the Nazarite Vow, which is what Samson would have been under, we're going to look at that briefly. That's in Numbers 6, 1-21. And Samson burning a field, that's in Judges 15, verses 4 and 5. So I've got some links going on down there for you. So that'll help. So this is really an intriguing story for me. I kind of discounted it when I was first looking at the studies. Because I thought, well, it's really not that big of a story. Then I started looking at more at who Samson was and how everything came about and what a violent person he was. So that kind of helped me understand more about like everything here. So we're going to look at that first. Also, I will back up just a smidge and tell you that Samson was a Nazarite, and the lady he was with, Delilah, was a Philistine, and they didn't get along much. So, so that was traditionally some friction there between the two peoples, the two populations, and that led into some of this. So, okay, I was a little late coming in. That is due to my computer deciding that it was going to reboot. I did a Microsoft update, which I didn't want it to do. I kept telling it no, and so about 8:30, it decides it's going to update. So I was a couple of minutes late. No, I did not. I didn't have anything to say about that. All right, so first, let's go and just kind of look at what he did to burn a field. So we're going to look at that. And that's in Judges chapter 15, verses 4-5. Got my little sticky notes here marking my spots. And so just to give you a little bit of background on this, instead of reading the entire thing here, basically he was betrothed, and Then he kind of got mad and he left his betrothed for a while. Then he decided that he would go back and get her, except she had already been married off to another man. So that was kind of a little bit of a problem, you might say. But instead of, I've got notifications coming in. Okay. But instead of calmly and rationally discussing things like we would now, or we would hope that people would do, instead of that, Samson reacted violently, much more violently than we would ever expect. And so it's amazing here what he did. Notification. Okay. So in retaliation, he goes out and he captures 300 foxes, tied them tail to tail, and put a torch on their tails. And then he set them loose in the fields of grain that were owned by the Philistines. So instead of just taking it out on the person he was mad at, he took it out over everybody. So he burned down the field, and then there was some retaliation going back and forth, and that gives you an insight on the kind of violence, that level of violence that Samson lived by, which was not the way it was supposed to be. Only 2-3 of us in here. That's okay. We're going to have a few more coming in, I think, looking at the little notifications and stuff. So, okay. We get an idea of the kind of violence that's going on, but Samson was a Nazarite. And the problem with that is Nazarites had to take a vow. And as part of their vows, he was really way beyond what he'd agreed to. So during the vow that he would have taken was called the Nazarite Vow. And that vow is found in Numbers. And I'm pulling it back up now because I can't see my note. Okay. Numbers chapter 6, verses 1 to 21. And it says, if a man or woman wants to make a special vow, a vow of dedication to the Lord as a Nazarite, they must abstain from wine and other fermented drink, and must not drink vinegar made from wine or other fermented drink. They must not drink grape juice or eat grapes or raisins. As long as they remain under the Nazarite vow, they must not eat anything that comes from the grapevine, not even seeds or skins. During the entire period of their Nazarite vow, no razor may be used on their head. They must be holy until the period of their dedication to the Lord is over. They must let their hair grow long. So for the entire time that they've dedicated themselves to the Lord as Nazarites, their hair has to remain long. Then it says, throughout the period of their dedication to the Lord, the Nazarite must not go near a dead body. Even if their own father or mother or brother or sister dies, they must not make themselves ceremonial unclean on account of them. Because the symbol of their dedication to God is out on their head, throughout the period of their dedication, they are consecrated to the Lord. So if someone suddenly dies in the Nazarite's presence, thus defiling the hair that symbolizes their dedication, they must shave their head on the 7th day. So they are allowed, in certain circumstances, to cut their hair. And that is when their time as a Nazarite dedication is over, or for the ritual cleansing. Then on the 8th day, they must bring in 2 doves or 2 pigeons to the priest. Now, the law of the Nazarite, when the period of their dedication is over, they are to be brought to the entrance of the tent of meeting, where they are to present their offerings to the Lord of a year-old lamb, and oil and loaves and other items. And the priest is to present these to the Lord. And then at the entrance to the tent of meeting, the Nazarite must shave off all the hair that symbolizes their dedication. And then after that, the priest is to place in their hands a boiled shoulder of the ram, one thick loaf, and one thin loaf from the basket, and wave these before the Lord as an offering, for they are holy and belong to the priest, together with the breast that was waved and the thigh that was presented. And then after that, the Nazarite may drink wine. So it goes on to talk about that and the importance of them fulfilling their vows. So we have this picture of what Samson should do, and we have this picture of what's about to happen, the picture of what he should do, and the picture of some of the things he's done. And into all of this comes Delilah. Now, we know that Delilah is not his first choice by any reason. She just wasn't. And so there was already some friction there, potentially. And there's the friction there because of them being two different countries that didn't get along, or two different populations of people. So lots of friction. Now, Samson is one of the most recognizable judges who ruled over Israel, and he had incredible strength. And he fought the Philistines. But the Philistines went to Delilah and wanted to know what the source was of his strength and what they could do to basically take him down, so to speak. That would be kind of what we would say today. So let's look at this, flipping over to our passage about Delilah, which is down in the description box. Okay. And that is in Judges chapter 16, verses 4 to 19. My dyscalculia is coming in there too. So we'll go look at this. And it says, sometime later, well, I'm just going to go back and read starting from chapter 1. I think it'll make more sense. One day, Samson went to Gaza, where he saw a prostitute. He went in to spend the night with her. The people of Gaza were told that Samson is here. So they surrounded the place and lay in wait for him all night at the city gate. They made no move during the night, saying, "At dawn, we'll kill him." So the people that he was with were already looking for him and plotting. So Samson lay there only until the middle of the night. Then he got up and took hold of the doors of the city gate together with the two posts and tore them loose, bars and all. He lifted them to his shoulders and carried them to the top of the hill that faces Hebron. So we know from this that he is very, very strong. This is one indication of his strength and one reason why the Philistines were in fear of him. And then sometime later, he fell in love with a woman in the valley of Sorek whose name was Delilah. The rulers of the Philistines went to her and said, "See if you can lure him into showing you the secret of his great strength and how we can overpower him, so we may tie him up and subdue him. And each one of us will give you 1,100 shekels of silver." So I wanted to understand, how much money is that? And it works out to be, this says, about 3 years worth of salary, 3 years pay. She has been offered to betray her husband. Of course, I guess in this day and age, that would be the equivalent now of what we're paying for 3 dozen eggs? So she took him up on it. She was okay with betraying her husband. And there's lots of things that could play into that. You know, was it the fact that she was not his first love? Or was it the fact that he liked girls? Because, you know, we know that he was engaged to somebody else at one point, that he was so mad that he burned the fields down. We know that he saw prostitutes, and then there's Delilah. So obviously not his first choice. With his penchant for violence, for burning down fields, he may have been a violent person in the household. There may have been some domestic violence going on. We really don't know what all played into this, but we know there was friction there. And so she took him up on it, and Delilah said to Samson, "Tell me the secret of your great strength and how you could be tied up and subdued." So she told him what they were going to do to him. She laid it all out there. And Simon answered her, "If anyone ties me with 7 fresh bowstrings that have not been dried, I'll become as weak as any other man." Then the rulers of the Philistines brought her 7 fresh bowstrings that had not been dried, and she tied him with them. Then with the men hidden in the room, she called to him, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." But he snapped the bowstrings as easily as a piece of string snaps when it comes close to a flame. So the secret of his strength was not discovered. I don't know about you all, but if somebody asked me the source of my strength, told me that they were going to tie me up, and did, I would be out of there. I would not go back to Delilah at all. Okay? How about you all? Would you stick and go back a second time to see Delilah? Crazy. So then Delilah goes to Samson and says, "You've made a fool of me. You lied to me. Come on now. Tell me how you can be tied." So again, she goes back to him, and he says, "Well, if anyone ties me securely with new ropes that have never been used, I'll become as weak as any other man." So what happens? Delilah takes the new ropes and tied him with them. Then with men hidden in the room, she called to him, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." But he snapped the ropes off of his arms as though they were threads. Twice she betrays him with a word of how he can be subdued after she told him what was going on. So I'm like, part of me is like, Samson, what were you thinking? What? And Peter is saying, "May the sun shine upon you and God be gracious to you as you go serve the Lord. Now go in peace. Good night all. Got to run now. I will watch this later tonight." And then he says, "Merry Easter and a Happy New Year." Thank you for coming in, Peter. Thank you. I hope that you have a good night too. So I'm just like, okay, what are you thinking at this point, Samson? I just want to just know that. So Delilah says to Samson, "All this time you've been making a fool of me and lying to me. Tell me how you can be tied." So she's nagging him. He has got this blinder going on, and I don't know if it's denial or what. But she goes back and says, "You're making a fool of me." The only way that she's going to be made a fool of is if she's telling people what he said and it's not working, right? I'm just like, I can't believe this. So then he says, "Well, if you weave 7 braids of my head into the fabric on the loom and tighten it with a pin, I'll become as weak as any other man." So while he was sleeping, Delilah took the 7 braids of his head, wove them into the fabric, and tied them with a pin. And then again she called to him, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. He awoke from his sleep, pulled up the pin and the loom with the fabric. So, like, you would think that he would have gotten the message. I think I would have gotten the message. And then she said to him, how can you say I love you when you won't confide in me? This is the third time you have made a fool of me and haven't told me the secret of your great strength. And with such nagging, she prodded him day after day until he was sick to death of it. Now, today, I believe we would indeed call this domestic violence going on in the household, at this point directed toward him. But and it doesn't excuse, though, the blind spot that he has in his life for Delilah. So what does he do at this point? He tells her everything she needs to know. And it even says, so he told her everything. No razor has been used ever on my head, he said, because I have been a Nazarite, dedicated to God from my mother's womb. If my head were shaved, my strength would leave me, and I would become as weak as any other man. So what's Delilah going to do? When Delilah saw that he had told her everything, she sent word to the rulers of the Philistines. Come back once more. He has told me everything. So the rulers of the Philistines returned with silver in their hands. So now actually they believe her. Which, how? She's already given this misinformation 3 times. But this time, they believe her, and they come, with the silver, and then they put him to sleep on her lap. Now, putting him to sleep on her lap is not letting him fall asleep naturally. This is an indication that there is some kind of substance that has been used. And after they put him to sleep on her lap, she called for someone to shave off the 7 braids of his hair, and so began to subdue him, and his strength left him. Then she called, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. And he awoke from his sleep and thought, I'll go out as before and shake myself free. But he did not know that the Lord had left him, and that's because his hair had been shaved or cut. And then the Philistines seized him, gouged out his eyes, and took him down to Gaza. Binding him with bronze shackles, they set him to grinding grain in the prison. But the hair on his head began to grow again after it had been cut. So then the rulers of the Philistines assembled to offer a great sacrifice to Dagon, which is their god, to celebrate, saying, our God has delivered Samson, our enemy, into our hands. And when the people saw him, they praised God, saying, God had delivered our enemy into our hands, the one who laid waste to our land and multiplied our slain. So it's really interesting that Samson is set to work grinding grain after he had burned their field of grain. So let's go back and look at this a little bit more. We have some of Samson's point of view. Let's go back and look at this just a little bit more about Delilah, because we know that, once again, she was a woman who lived in the Valley of Sorek, and that was actually near Samson's hometown of Zorah. And she was a Philistine, and the rulers went to her. So why would they choose her instead of going like to the prostitute that he had seen, and others that were around her? Because it was because they felt like they could buy her, right? That's why you would go to someone in this position. So Delilah's role in the story was to discover his strength and betray him to the Philistines. But what was going on with Delilah, we know that she was greedy, right? We know that she didn't have any respect for him at all. And we know that she was willing to betray her husband over and over and over. But we also know her to be extremely manipulative by the nagging that she was doing to try to get the information out of Samson. And even going as far to say, you don't love me, or you would tell me this, you don't love me, or you would tell me this information, right? So no. We can also gauge that she was very persistent. Not only did she give the wrong information 3 times, but she kept going on and on and on, and kept going back to the people who had promised her the money. So at no time did she ever consider her husband, right? Or consider the fact that, if they only give her the equivalent of 3 years worth of wages, and she has to rely on her husband, as women did at the time, to make her living, what was she going to do when that money ran out and she suddenly has no income because her husband has been turned over to the Philistines? So there's no indication that she had any kind of forethought at all other than to betray Samson to the Philistines and deliver him over. So we know that she was very self-centered. But what can we learn from all of this? We're reading the story, and the purpose is to learn, right? So what can we learn? And so one of the lessons that we can take away from this is the danger of giving into temptation, because that's what she did. And, sometimes we have this temptation to be swayed by, what they call worldly desires. And, advertising throws temptation at us all the time, right? Because we can't be satisfied with the phone that we absolutely had to have several months ago. We're not satisfied with that anymore when the newest one comes in. And why are we not satisfied? It's because advertising tells us that we continually have to want the next shiniest, biggest thing. So we have this temptation, right, to go out and buy a phone, or if we have a car and we suddenly see a newer model and maybe they've changed it, and that car that we've been driving now looks super sleek and has this new car smell, and we just are all tempted by this. So one of the things that we can learn from Delilah's story is to be content with what we have or what we can get through legitimate means, through going to school, to getting a better job, and to taking care of ourselves. That's one of the things that we can take away from this. Instead of being motivated by greed, to be motivated by our needs. Because there's a huge difference in our needs versus our wants. Delilah never did look at her needs. Her needs were to stay with Samson, let him make an income, and because that's how it was done at the time. She didn't really have an option unless she wanted to be a prostitute. She really didn't have an option to make a living like we do now. So rather than to be greedy for that temptation of the moment, we need to learn to make a plan and to think about, okay, what does our long-term situation look like? And I think one of the other things that we can take from this is to, take stock. What are our weaknesses and what are our vulnerabilities? Samson's strength was tied to his vow to God. Delilah had no respect for that at all. She didn't care. But she was also very vulnerable at the time as a woman in this time period because she couldn't make an income. She didn't have any way. And Samson, I think, kind of made himself vulnerable by having this blind spot where Delilah was concerned. So I think that, really taking stock of our vulnerabilities and our weaknesses and looking at our strengths that we have been given. And when we talk about looking at these in the context of faith, we're talking about, we don't necessarily need to make a vow like the Nazarites did, but there are some times when we need to change our plans and live for God, because that's where our strength comes from. As Christians, we reach out and we can rely on God to help us. Because here's the thing, just because we're Christians and we believe in God does not mean that our lives are perfect from the moment we accept Christ. We have to continue to live that and to exercise our faith. So when we're faced with our weaknesses and our vulnerabilities, we go to God and we can say, hey, help me out with this. I have heard drug addicts talked about the way they came off of God was repeatedly saying that and getting that strength 1 minute at a time sometimes. And that's okay. That's okay, because that strength eventually moves you to a better place. That's what the vow of the Nazarites was supposed to do for the Nazarites. It was supposed to help them go to that better spot in their lives so they wouldn't be as likely to, give in to the temptations that were in front of them. But we know that Samson didn't do a very good job with that, or he wouldn't have been seeing the prostitutes, right? So he's very human. The other way that we can look at our lessons, and I'm going back to the notes that I've written here, we can apply the lessons by being mindful and by guarding ourselves against the temptation, and that's why we keep going to Christ, and making a conscious effort to uphold our own spiritual values and our commitments. Upholding our spiritual values is a lot easier said than done, and I get that. But, we have to take stock and looking at what are our spiritual values. And I'm not going to go into the whole long list because it may be slightly different for one person than the other. So I would encourage you to take stock of that. If you keep a prayer journal and you keep this written down, then do so, okay? Keep that written down. The thing about prayer journals, which I really love, is the fact that you can fill it out and write it down. Then you go on through and, maybe you keep your journal every day. Maybe you don't because life happens. But then a few weeks, a few months down the road, you go back and flip through the prayer journal and you can see how you have oftentimes been shored up and been given a stronger faith right when you needed it. Or you can see that it's been a growth process and you're stronger than you were when you first put whatever issue it was in the prayer journal. Does that make sense? So yeah, hopefully that will help. And the story for Samson ended with a great show of strength. He had done all these things wrong, But yet, at the end of the story, he still had this great show of strength, and God honored him. So I'm going to leave this here. Going over to Judges, back to Judges. We're going to start in 24, and I'm going to keep on reading. When the people saw him, they praised God, saying that God had delivered Samson to them, and while they were in the high spirits, they shouted, "Bring Samson out to entertain us." So Samson was going to be entertainment. He performed for them. And then it says, when they stood him among the pillars, Samson said to the servant who held his hand, "Put me where I can feel the pillars and support the temple, so that I may lean against them." Now the temple was crowded with men and women. All the rulers of the Philistines were there. On the roof were about 3,000 men and women watching Samson perform. So they have taken him, and basically he's become a circus act. A circus act. And then he prays to the Lord, "Sovereign Lord, remember me. Please, God, strengthen me once more, and let me with one blow take revenge on the Philistines for my eyes." So you got to remember that he's propped up against the pillars and he can't see. He's been turned into a circus act. He's had to perform for the people. And then even though he broke his vow, and even though he told Delilah how to break his vows, God still honored him. And Samson reached toward the two central pillars on which the temple stood. Bracing himself against him with his right hand on one and his left hand on the other, Samson said, "Let me die with the Philistines." Then he pushed with his might, and down came the temple on the rulers and all the people in it. Then his brothers and his father's whole family went down to get him. They brought him back and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol in the tomb of his father. And he had led Israel at this point for 20 years. So even though, and the Philistines and the Israelites were enemies, and even though he had, violated his oath and was a very violent person, and even though he was in these situations and he gave his strength up essentially by telling Delilah how to do it, God still honored that. And he was able to take out the enemy by suddenly getting his strength back after it had been gone. So a lot we can learn here about redemption, about weaknesses and vulnerabilities, about relying on our spirituality for our strength. And I do have to wonder, why was Delilah willing to be with him at all, knowing that he had taken this vow when obviously it meant nothing to her, So just my thoughts on that. Whatever you all think, drop it over here in the chat or drop it in the comments below, because I always like to hear your comments and hear what you guys and ladies are thinking about this. And now, as part of overcoming the obstacles, I want to pray for anyone who needs it. So I have a couple of prayer requests that have come in that I've written down. And yes, I know, sticky notes. I got sticky notes everywhere. Y'all, I've been called the sticky note queen because when I went back to school, I put sticky notes in all of my books to mark my places so I could find them. And yeah, here we go. My sticky notes here and there. So our prayer requests that have come in, whoops. Sometimes sticky notes stick where you don't want them to. So, all right. Prayer requests that have come in. A woman asked me to pray for a friend's mom. The friend's name is Melanie, to pray for her. I always want to pray for my moderators and everyone who supports me on this channel and Bodacious Broads, because you all are awesome, nothing short of awesome. So I continue to pray for you all. There's something that I'm looking at possibly doing with a friend. We're going to be talking more in November, and I want to pray for that also. Another friend of mine says she would like prayer, but she doesn't want me to put everything out there, just that she has been going through a really rough time with her health. So we've got that. And Lori says, me too. So we will definitely pray for you. And I just want to check the email again one more time just to make sure I didn't overlook anything. So let me do this. I've got two screens going on here. So if you see me looking on one screen, that's why. I'm still paying attention to you though. Don't worry. And if you guys want to see my notes on this, let me know. Let's check here. Okay. So I think I've got everyone, and some people have asked for general prayers, and we will do that. All right. Lord, thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to come together this evening. For the prayer requests that have been made, Lord, we lift those up to you, because only you know all the situations and all the needs. And we would ask that you be made manifest in all of our situations, Lord, so that we can clearly see you. Because, Lord, we have weaknesses, we have vulnerabilities, we have times that we don't keep our promises that we've made to you. And, Lord, we ask that you be made manifest in the situations so that we can see you and that we can more easily draw our strength from you. And that you are there to walk us through the difficult paths, Lord. And we thank you for that. Help us continue to do that. In your holy, blessed name, amen. So thank you all again so much for being here. I hope you have a great weekend. And as a surprise for you all, I mentioned a prayer journal. If you don't have one, you will in a minute, because I have a free digital version of a prayer journal that I am going to send to you right now if you want it. But I'm going to put it down in the description box so you'll have it. So feel free to download it, no strings attached or anything. That is down. It's going to be down in the description box in just a minute for you. So feel free to use that as often as you want to. So thank you again for tuning in. I'm putting that prayer journal link right now. Again, it's free. It's a Google Docs. It is copyrighted. I do want to say that. So please don't go out and sell it or share it for profit. You can share it with people that you know, just as long as you don't do it for profit. So thank you all again. Have a good night, and I will see you on Sunday night at 9 and some during the week. So y'all take care. Have a good night. Thank you, Lori, for coming in. Good night, everyone.